Russia is celebrating Victory Day, marking the 78th anniversary of victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. A military parade is expected to take place soon on Red Square, and President Vladimir Putin is set to attend and deliver a speech. We're taking you now live to Moscow. You're looking at live pictures of that military parade happening right now in Moscow. We do know that Russian Defense Minister Sergey Shoigu said 10,000 military personnel and 125 pieces of weapons and military equipment will be displayed on the Red Square. The occasion is seen as a chance for Russia to remember the sacrifices made during World War II, when an estimated 27 million Soviet citizens died, by far the greatest loss of any country. And if you're just joining us on CGTN, you're looking at live pictures coming out of Moscow, where a military parade to mark Victory Day is happening on Red Square. And World War II was often called the Great Patriotic War in Russia, and May 9th is one of the country's most revered holidays. Uniformed soldiers, military police officers, National Guardsmen and cadets are expected to march through the iconic Red Square. People there will also observe a moment of silence in honor of the millions killed in the war. During the past 10 years, Victory Day is also traditionally marked with a massive civilian march called the Immortal Regiment. People carry portraits of their relatives who fought and defeated the Nazis. But the marches will be canceled this year. Last year, President Putin said it was Russia's duty to keep alive memories of those lost. He accused NATO of preparing for an invasion and said Russia's attack on Ukraine was a needed and timely measure. Again, you're watching live pictures of an ongoing military parade on Red Square in Moscow, Russia, to mark Victory Day over Nazi Germany in World War II. We do know that President Vladimir Putin is expected to deliver a speech. We're staying on top of everything happening in Moscow for you this hour, and we'll bring you live to that speech by Vladimir Putin later in our program. Make sure you stay with us right here on CGTN. And joining me here in the studio and watching this military parade with me is Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Soochow University. Professor, welcome, and we're watching this unfold in Moscow together. What do you make of the importance of the military parade this year? I mean, one of the things, it's about marking then Soviet Union's triumph over Nazi Germany at the end of World War II for sure, but do you think it takes an added significance this year as the Ukraine crisis enters its second year, and Vladimir Putin might be using this occasion to boost morale and send some key messages to the outside world that is, of course, watching this unfold in Moscow as well?
Indeed, I think it's a special privilege for me to sit with you in the studio and watch the parade as it is taking place. I think as for all the years since 1945, today has always been a solemn day to mark the victory of the former Soviet Union and the Allied countries against the defeat of Nazi Germany, and also against Japanese fascism in Asia-Pacific region. And also, I think today provides an occasion for the Russian government and the Russian people to look back to more than 70 years ago as to what their people did and what their people suffered, and all the tens of millions of people lost in their final ultimate victory against Nazi Germany. And now Russia is in the middle of a special military operation, or as many other countries call, a war involving Ukraine. It is a soul-searching moment as to why Russia is involved in such a military operation. What's the purpose? what's the process, what's the ultimate goal for Russia, for example, and what will be the consequences for peace and stability and development, not only involving Russia and Ukraine on the one hand, but in Europe as a whole and further throughout the world. So I think today is a very important day because we expect that President Putin will make an important speech, and we need to listen very carefully as to what he will say, what will be the implication for the war in Ukraine, what will be the implication for peace and stability on the Eurasian continent.
Of course, Professor, as you said, we look forward to hearing from that speech by Vladimir Putin, what he will say, his take on what point or what phase this military operation has now entered the second year into this crisis, his take on the situation there. Can I ask you about the World War II? And after World War II, a new world order was established, and many would go so far as saying that world order is now in jeopardy because of voices against globalization, because of unilateralism on the rise, and many say a new Cold War mentality also on the rise. Can you shed light on your thoughts on the new world order now?
Right now, the debate or the discussion about the world order and what stage at the world order process, for example, we are in, is a very hot and hotly debated item. Now, Russia believes that they need to strive for a new world order. And the United States also claims that whatever that happens to the war in Ukraine, after the Ukrainian war, the world order will be different. Whereas China still emphasizes that we are...
Professor, hold that thought. I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'll be back with you in just a few moments' time. Our correspondent Stuart Smith is also watching all of this for us in Moscow. Stuart, talk to us about the mood there in Moscow. Is there anything different in the air this year? What is palpable in the air?
Yeah, where I am now, there's a mood that's very relaxed. People here enjoying the start of the procession, which began a few minutes ago, and also enjoying what is a very sunny and good day for coming to try to enjoy the military parade that so many look forward to each year as an opportunity to remember what Russia did, the Soviet Union did all those years ago, defeating Nazi Germany. But of course, it's also linked and is a cause for celebration amongst some, a cause for concern amongst others, that the military is fighting once again to the west of Russia. It's something which is linked time and time again by President Vladimir Putin, linking the past fighting to the fighting of today. And while here people are excited to see the troops and enjoy the atmosphere, there are others around Russia who will also be concerned about the link between the fight against Nazi Germany that's being made between the fight that Russia is engaged in Ukraine today.
Stuart, we are of course waiting to hear from President Vladimir Putin, that key speech he will be making as part of the military parade. Talk to us also about what else we can expect to see at this parade today.
Yeah, so the first big difference between previous years worth mentioning is for the troops here, there are fewer of them. So there's around 10,000 rather than the usual 14,000. There's less modern equipment because that is being used to fight in Ukraine. And also it's likely to be a shorter ceremony based on the TV scheduling, perhaps by as much as 20 minutes compared to the usual hour. All of that because resources are of course directed elsewhere. Having said that, there are more foreign leaders here this year compared to last year when it was only a few months after the start of the so-called special military operation. Leaders from former Soviet Union countries joining the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Stuart Smith live in Moscow for us today. Stuart, thank you so much. We will be, of course, monitoring that.
78-й годовщиной победы в Великой Отечественной войне. Здравствуйте, товарищи! Поздравляю вас с 78-й годовщиной победы в Великой Отечественной войне! Здравствуйте, товарищи! Поздравляю вас с 78-й годовщиной победы в Великой Отечественной войне! Верховный главнокомандующий Вооруженными силами Российской Федерации. Войска Московского гарнизона к параду Победы готовы. Министр обороны генерал армии Шойгу.
Уважаемые граждане России,
started even before opening the embassy just like a couple of weeks ago.
We interrupt our programming to take you now live back to Moscow, Russia, where President Vladimir Putin is delivering a speech marking Victory Day. Let's listen together. You're watching live pictures coming out of Moscow, where a military parade is ongoing in Red Square, marking Russia's Victory Day.
Fellow Russian citizens, dear veterans, comrade soldiers and seamen, sergeants and sergeants majors, midshipmen and warrant officers, comrade officers, generals,
поздравляю вас с праздником, с Днем Победы.
And admirals, I congratulate you on the Victory Day.
Которые прославили и обессмертили свои имена, отстояв Отечество. Ценой неизмеримого мужества и огромных жертв спасли человечество.
We congratulate you on this holiday, and our fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers sacrificed their life for this great victory. That's a huge sacrifice and a defense for our motherland.
Дали отпор международному терроризму, защитим и жителей Донбасса, обеспечим свою безопасность. Для нас, для России,
we right now also continue our fight for our country in Donbass.
ни на Западе, ни на Востоке.
against
Как и
international terrorism.
абсолютное большинство людей на планете, мы хотим видеть будущее мирным, свободным и стабильным. Считаем, что любая
We
идеология
are not targeting
превосходства
anyone.
по своей
We
природе
are there
отвратительна,
for our future, for the
преступна
world,
и смертоносна.
for the security of
Однако
our
западные
home.
глобалистские элиты по-прежнему твердят о своей исключительности, стравливают людей и раскалывают общество, провоцируют кровавые конфликты и перевороты, сеют ненависть, русофобию, агрессивный национализм, уничтожают и семейные, традиционные
They
ценности,
theory
которые
of
делают
Russophobia and
человека
also
человеком.
incite the conflicts
И все для того,
between
чтобы
Russia
и
and other
дальше
countries.
диктовать, навязывать народам свою волю, свои права, правила, а по сути систему грабежа, насилия и подавления. Похоже, они забыли, к чему привели безумные
And they
притязания
also prize us
нацистов на
from
мировое
different
господство.
aspects.
Забыли, кто разгромил это чудовищное, тотальное зло, кто встал стеной за родную землю и не пожалел своих жизней ради освобождения народов Европы. Мы видим, как в ряде стран безжалостно и хладнокровно
But we
разрушают
need to
мемориалы
remember
советским
who
воинам,
really made great
сносят
sacrifice for the
памятники
great
великим
victory,
полководцам, создают настоящий культ
sacrificed their
нацистов
life.
и их пособников, а память о подлинных героях пытаются стереть и оболгать. Такое надругательство над подвигом и жертвами победившего
The
поколения – это
patriotism,
тоже
the
преступление.
heroism should be carried
Откровенный
forward
реваншизм
because
тех,
we are
кто
descend
цинично
from
и
the
неприкрыто
generation
готовил
of the
новый
victors.
поход на Россию, кто собрал для этого неонацистскую нечисть со всего мира. Их цель, и здесь нет ничего нового, добиться распада и уничтожения нашей страны, перечеркнуть итоги Второй мировой
Our
войны,
enemies did not to invent something new. They just repeat it. They want to wrap us up,
задушить любые
and they
суверенные
also
центры
ruin
развития.
and damage the international order
Непомерные
and
амбиции,
international law.
высокомерие и вседозволенность неизбежно оборачиваются трагедией. Именно в этом причина катастрофы, которую переживает сейчас украинский народ. Он стал заложником государственного переворота и сложившегося на его базе преступного режима его западных хозяев. Разменные монеты в реализации их жестоких,
Through
корыстных
these
планов.
kind of activities,
Для нас в России
put their
память о
people
защитниках
as the
Отечества
hostage, and
священна.
also the card
Мы
to
храним
play.
ее в наших сердцах. Отдаем должное участникам сопротивления, которые отважно сражались с нацизмом. Бойцам
Russia is
союзнических армий
different. What we are doing
США,
is
Великобритании, других
sacred.
государств. Помним и чтим
We
подвиг
fight
воинов
for the
Китая
security
в битве
of
с
the
японским
motherland.
милитаризмом. Убежден, опыт солидарности, партнерства в годы борьбы с общей угрозой – это наше бесценное наследие, прочная опора именно сейчас, когда набирает силу необратимое движение к более справедливому многополярному миру,
To save the security and also carry forward the priceless legacy left by our generations of victors.
Всех стран и народов. Очень важно, что сегодня здесь, в Москве, собрались лидеры стран Содружества
And we also
независимых
fight for
государств.
a
Вижу в
multipolar
этом
world
благодарное отношение к подвигу наших предков.
and for free
Они
development for
вместе
all
сражались
nations.
и вместе победили. Все народы СССР внесли свой вклад в общую победу. Мы всегда будем помнить об этом. Склоняем головы перед светлой памятью всех,
Previously in the
жизнь
Soviet
отняла
Union
война.
time, that people from
Перед
different
памятью сыновей,
ethnicities fought
дочерей,
shoulder to shoulder,
отцов,
sacrificed their life,
матерей, дедов, мужей, жен, братьев, сестер, родных, друзей.
and no
Объявляется
family in Russia
минута
have
молчания.
not burned by the Great Patriotic War. And we also bow to the blessed memory of the sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, grandfathers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, and family members. Let us observe a minute of silence.
Уважаемые граждане России, битвы, решающие для судеб нашей Родины, всегда становились отечественными, народными и священными. Мы верны заветам предков, глубоко и ясно
They're
понимаем,
citizens
что
of
значит быть
Russia.
достойными высоты их
Vital
ратных,
decides
трудовых
the
и
destiny of our
нравственных свершений.
motherland.
Мы гордимся участниками специальной военной операции, всеми, кто сражается на передовой, кто под огнем обеспечивает фронт,
For
спасает раненых.
everyone participating
Нет
in
сейчас
the special
важнее
military
дела,
operation,
чем ваша
I'm
боевая
proud of
работа.
you.
На вас держится сегодня безопасность страны. От вас зависит будущее нашей государственности и нашего народа. Вы с
Because
честью
of your
исполняете свой
unfolding
ратный долг.
spirit, our country
Сражаетесь за Россию.
will be forever saved
За вами ваши
and
семьи,
insecure.
дети, друзья. Они ждут вас. Уверен, вы чувствуете их
Your
безграничную
families,
любовь.
your children,
Вся страна
waiting
сплотилась,
for
чтобы
you coming back
поддержать
home.
наших героев. Все готовы помочь.
the whole
молятся о
country
вас.
is at your back.
Товарищи, друзья, дорогие ветераны, сегодня в каждой нашей семье
Comrades,
чествуют
friends,
участников Великой Отечественной
veterans.
войны. Вспоминают своих родных, своих героев, возлагают цветы к воинским мемориалам. Мы с вами стоим на Красной площади, на земле, которая помнит дружинников Юрия Долгорукова и Дмитрия Донского, ополченцев Минина и Пожарского, воинов Петра Великого и Кутузова.
Every household
Парады
celebrated the victory
1941
for the World War
и
II.
1945 годов. Сегодня здесь
And we also
участники
remember the
специальной военной
heroes
операции.
from the
Это
war.
кадровые военнослужащие и те, кто пополнили
Indeed.
ряды вооруженных сил в
The
ходе
special
частичной
military
мобилизации.
operation is still
Это
undergoing,
бойцы луганских и
and our
донецких
soldiers
корпусов,
and officers
многих
are fighting
добровольческих
heroically
боевых соединений, сотрудники
on the front
Росгвардии, МВД, ФСБ, МЧС, других специальных служб и ведомств. Приветствую вас, друзья! Приветствую всех, кто сражается за Россию на ратном
the
поле,
countries,
кто сейчас
the whole
находится
countries,
на боевом
ministries,
посту.
organizations
В годы
who
Великой
support
Отечественной войны наши
frontline
героические
fight.
предки доказали, что нет ничего крепче, мощнее и надежнее нашего единства. Нет в мире ничего сильнее нашей любви к Родине.
the
За
history
Россию,
proved
за наши доблестные
that no
вооруженные
one
силы,
can destroy
за победу!
the great nation of Russia.
Ура!
Glory to the victory. To Russia. To our armed forces. Ula.
Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking at the annual military parade in Moscow. Some key messages sent by the Russian president on this very special occasion. He first paid tribute to lives lost in the Second World War fighting Nazi Germany. He did vow to continue to fight in Donbass against what he called international terrorism. He blamed the conflicts Russia had with other countries on Russophobia and said what Russia was doing was sacred. It was a fight for the security of the motherland. He said Russia would continue to fight for a multipolar world and for free development of all nations. He said he was proud of everyone involved in the special military operation and that their country will be saved. Joining me here in the studio is Professor Victor Gao. Professor, it does seem that he made some connection between the legacy left from the Soviet Union's battle with Nazi Germany to what Russia is doing today. He connects the two and calling them both the legacy of the Russian people, the heroic deeds of the Russian people. What do you make of what was said by Vladimir Putin just now?
Well, indeed, I think President Putin definitely recalled the war against Nazi Germany and all the sacrifices that the Russian people and the former Soviet Union people made in the defeat of Nazi Germany back in 1945 and beyond, before then. And he also connected the past with the present because he said that Western countries are out there to get Russia. They want to really defeat Russia. They want to do all these bad things against Russia. And that's why Russia needs to defend its security. And he also declared that Russia cannot be defeated. And he wanted to assure the people in Russia, as well as all the relatives, the family members of those soldiers fighting in the forefront, for example, in the battleground, and also mourned the loss of the soldiers and consoled the family members, for example. And I think he really wanted to cheer the whole nation up, to boost their morale and to emphasize that the war in Ukraine, or the special operation as they call it, in Ukraine eventually will end as a victory for Russia, as it did in 1945 in the fight against Nazi Germany. Definitely he connected these two major events together and wanted to really boost the morale of the Russian people today, as their morale were boosted before the final victory against Nazi Germany in the former Soviet Union era.
Professor, the intended audience of that speech just now was both international and domestic. I doubt those in the West will think of Russia any differently after hearing that speech. But just for the domestic audience here, we're talking about ordinary Russian citizens. We're talking about those that are still fighting in the special military operation and their families. How do you think that speech was received by them? What key information or messages were they looking for when their president spoke?
Indeed, I think President Putin in his important speech spoke mostly to the Russians at home, and his purpose is very clear: to comfort them and to boost their confidence in Russia as a country, in the Russian nation as a nation, and also in Russia in terms of achieving a final victory in the special military operations in Ukraine. However, he also spoke to all those heads of states present at the parade, mostly from the former Soviet Union republics, for example, and I think his purpose is very clear. He wanted to demonstrate to the world that Russia is not standing alone all by itself. Russia has all those friendly countries who were represented there at the parade, and he also wanted to speak to people in those countries to give them a level of comfort that Russia is here. He is really leading the Russian people in this battle against the, as he called it, Nazis, for example, the terrorists, and eventually Russia will prevail. Now, his message to the West is also very clear. That is, Russia cannot be defeated on the battleground. And don't bet that Russia eventually will be defeated and lose the special military operation. So I think his message is multifaceted, delivered to different audiences.
Professor, I do want to talk to you about China here, because earlier this year, China released that important 12-point proposal on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. China's message has been consistent. First of all, China is for peace. Second of all, China thinks that dialogue and consultation is the only way out of the crisis, and China wants to facilitate a political, peaceful solution to the crisis here. Your take on that 12-point proposal and how that's going to help bring more momentum in solving this crisis politically and peacefully?
Well, first of all, China's proposal for ending the war or Ukrainian crisis is the only proposal aimed for using diplomacy and negotiations to end the Ukrainian crisis or special military operation or war in Ukraine. That's number one. Number two is that both Russia and Ukraine, to different degrees of course, expressed that they appreciated China producing this peace proposal. And eventually, many other countries, for example France, also expressed welcome that China is working hard to promote peaceful resolution of the war in Ukraine. I think eventually more and more people will agree that China's proposal for ending the war in peace, in diplomacy, will be standing on the right side of history, because the continuation of the war in Ukraine does not serve the fundamental interests of the people in Ukraine or people in Russia, and no country should pour more fuel onto the fire by trying to prolong the war in Ukraine, leading to more sacrifices of the civilian people in Ukraine. So I hope China's effort will eventually be hugely successful, and we will contribute to ending the war or the Ukrainian crisis through diplomacy and negotiations.
Professor Gao, always a pleasure to have you on our program. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming in today. Again, you're looking at live pictures coming out of Moscow to mark Victory Day. That parade on Red Square, the annual event, celebrates victory against Nazi Germany in World War II. Earlier in his address, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the world has forgot who defended against the Nazis. He stressed that the Russian people will remember the role the people of the former Soviet Union played in the victory against Nazi Germany. Putin also claims Western elites are sowing hatred and Russophobia, although Russia wants to see a peaceful future. The Russian president says he is proud of the combat members of what he calls the special military operations. He stressed that nothing is more important than the combat today. The Victory Day is one of the most important public holidays in Russia. It is time when people commemorate the huge sacrifices made by the former Soviet Union. Over 27 million of its citizens perished between 1941 and 1945. Leaders of 6 former Soviet states attended the celebration. Countries include Belarus, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Armenia were also in attendance.